Chapter 107, 6th Year, Negotiations. Sunday the 15th of January, 1977. He slept as late as possible the next morning to put off further confrontation. He couldn't talk to them, not yet, not until his head was straight. They'd have so many questions, some he couldn't answer, some he didn't want to. He showered for longer than usual. Something of Livia seemed to cling to him, and he turned the tap right up, trying to scold it off. The claw marks she left were healing already, but still itched under Remus's scratchy wool jumper. Washed and dressed, Remus went to his trunk and looked for a bit of spare parchment before scrawling an untidy note. "If you're still in the village, I'd like to talk to you again." He folded it in a hurry, shoved it in his pocket and headed for the owlery. The marauders were all in the common room, in much the same state they had been the night before. Remus looked at them, panicked, then bent his head and kept walking. "Moony, wait!" They followed him, all three, through the portrait hole. No matter, they couldn't discuss it in the open. He knew this, and they knew this. "We're going to the owlery," he said, marching ahead. "Do you want breakfast?" Peter asked. "After." "Moony, can we talk about what happened last night?" James asked, sounding very tired. Remus supposed he'd been bearing the brunt of Sirius's frustration. Good, let someone else do that for a bit. "Not here." Unfortunately, they all followed him to the owlery, which happened to be completely empty, except for owls, of course, most of which were sleeping. "Who are you writing to?" Sirius asked at once. Remus closed his eyes, sighed, and resumed tying his note to the nearest owl. "Ferox, my old professor." "Why?" Remus dropped the string he was using and tutted as he had to bend to pick it up. He continued to explain, calmly. "He's in Hogsmeade. I saw him last night, but I want to see him again." "What was he doing in—" Remus tutted again, fumbling with his third attempt to tie the note to the agitated owl's leg. Sirius was standing much too close, leaning over him, demanding answers, and Remus could barely concentrate. "He's working with Moody, and he got summoned there to bring me back." "Summoned by who?" "Fucking hell, give me a minute, will you?" Remus snapped. Sirius stood back, looking as if he'd very much like to say something else, but was biting his tongue. James touched his shoulder again. Remus ignored them both and tied the letter to the bird, maybe a bit too tight, because it pecked him angrily before flying off down towards the village. He could stay there, maybe. It might not take very long. But his stomach growled. He turned to look at his friends. "Okay. Breakfast?" "Are you going to tell—" "Yeah, Padfoot, fine. Let's, get some toast and go for a walk or something, okay?" So that's what they did. Remus buttered at least 5 slices of toast in the great hall, wrapped them in napkins, then stuffed them into his pockets of his robes. The other 3 marauders followed him, watching cautiously, as if they weren't sure quite what to make of him yet. "Right," he said, once they were outside. "You all need to shut up and let me tell it to you, okay? No interruptions." They nodded solemnly as they walked. He saw Sirius purse his lips. Tough, Remus thought spitefully. You can listen to me for once. So, he talked. He found it much easier than telling Dumbledore. At least he knew for sure that the marauders were on his side. He tried to explain everything with as little emotional context as possible. He had known there was a werewolf nearby. He went to find them. He met Livia. Ferox intervened. "Moony talked to me last summer," he explained, finally. "He said something to me, and it just made me think about how useful I can be, that's all. I have to stop looking at my furry little problem as a problem. If we're going to war with dark creatures, then as a dark creature I ought to be—" "You're not a dark creature," James said suddenly. "You're our Moony." Remus shrugged. He wouldn't have put money on James being the first to interrupt, but now he was pretty glad he had. He left a pause. There was nothing more to tell. James was still looking at him, with a small crease between his eyebrows. He pushed his glasses up his nose, clearly thinking very deeply. Peter, of course, looked anxious. He was staring at his feet, rubbing his hands together. Remus didn't look at Sirius. He looked for his fags instead. "So," James said, after swallowing. "She's gone now, has she? The werewolf?" "Livia," Remus said, cigarette between his teeth. "Yeah, I think Ferox scared her off." "Too bloody right," James nodded, much more comfortable about talking action. "And I bet with Moody on the case, she won't be back any time soon, yeah? So, are you in a lot of trouble with Dumbledore?" "I don't think so," Remus sighed. He rubbed his sore hip. "I think Dumbledore was more worried about me mucking up his spy ring rather than breaking any rules." "He wouldn't want to see you hurt. Any of us," James said sincerely. He eyed Remus's awkward posture. "Come on, there's a bench down here. You can finish your toast." They made slow progress towards the edge of the lake, where there were a few stone benches. It was too cold for anyone else to be out at this time on a Sunday, and Remus watched the late morning mist drift across the dark surface of the water as he chewed on the remains of his crusts. Sirius hadn't spoken yet, since the owlery, and Remus was trying not to notice it. Sirius felt betrayed. Remus knew that, as sure as he knew his own name. Betrayed even if he really didn't have a right to feel it. "This isn't about you," Remus wanted to hiss at the silent Sirius. "I can't believe we all slept through the most exciting night of the year." James nudged Remus, trying to bring a bit of levity to the otherwise rather sombre atmosphere. "Wasn't that exciting?" Remus grinned back, giving him what he wanted. "I was crap. If Ferox hadn't come, I don't know." "Do you think she could have disapparated with you?" Peter asked, still wringing his pudgy little hands. "I don't know," Remus replied. I got the impression anyway that she needed me to agree. Like, it had to be me who made the decision. Otherwise, I suppose they could all just gang up and snatch me." "Well then," James said, slapping his thigh triumphantly. "There's no problem, is there? I mean, there's no question." "No, of course not," Remus said quickly. "I'd never join Greyback." "Well then," James repeated, satisfied. Remus looked at his hands, still greasy from the toast. He wiped them on his trouser legs. Of course not. Of course he would never. Except... "Moony?" James said, sensing the odd quiet. "I'd never join him," Remus said, carefully. "And Livia she was awful, but..." He breathed in. "Not everything she said was wrong." "What's that supposed to mean?" Sirius burst out. Remus still didn't want to look at him, growing hot. "Just that, well, wizards treat us unfairly, and you lot wouldn't understand." Sirius sprang up, as if he'd been wound up to breaking point. He glared at Remus, as if he was about to start screaming at him. Then he walked away, at an impossible pace. "Black!" James stood up. "Oi!" "It's fine." Remus waved a hand. "Sorry. I shouldn't have said anything. I can't explain properly." "He's been such a moody git lately," James huffed, still watching the other boy storm away. "Go after him if you want," Remus said. "Honestly, you're the best at sorting him out when he's like that. Me and Wormu will find you later, yeah?" "Okay," James said, already moving. "Thanks, Moony." "Those two are so weird sometimes," Peter said, watching James catch up. "I swear, I never know what anyone's on about anymore. It's all war this and war that." "Yeah, it's a bit of a pain, innit?" Remus replied. He had meant it sarcastically, but poor Peter had never been quick on the uptake. Yeah, you know what I mean, don't you, Mooney? I just think, we're only 16. Can't we think about something other than doing the right thing all the time? We used to have fun. Remus was only half listening. He stretched, rubbing his hip again to see if it would move for him. Think I might go back to bed, Pete. Or the library. Why don't you go and see Desi? What? You didn't know? Peter stared at him incredulously as he helped Remus to his feet. Know what? Remus asked, arching his back again for good measure. She dumped me. Oh shit. Remus blinked. Sorry, mate. Was that last night too? Last week, Peter said, with an uncharacteristic coldness in his voice. Sorry, Remus said again, embarrassed. He didn't think he'd actually spoken to Peter about anything much in weeks. He'd been so wrapped up in Sirius, and the wolf pack, and Sirius, and Christopher. He resolved to do much better with all of his friends. After all, as soon as he turned 17, they would be all he had. I'm really sorry, Wormtail, he said kindly. Want to play chess instead, then? Monday, the 16th of January, 1977. Remus was genuinely sorry to hear about Peter and Desi. He'd never really been a part of their group, but she was a nice enough girl and had made Peter happy. She had given him something that James and Sirius did not have, and that was special in itself. The breakup had simply been down to a change in attitudes. They had been seeing each other since they were 14, and at 16 it seemed that Desdemona wished to spread her wings a bit. She might change her mind, Remus suggested to a glum-faced Peter over their third chess game. Doubt it, Peter huffed. Reckon she's got a crush on that Roman Rotherhide bloke, wanker. Knight to F3. I thought Mary was seeing him. Mary sees everyone, Peter sniggered meanly. She's like the girl version of Padfoot. Ferox's reply arrived later that Sunday evening. Remus, I'm afraid I can't invite you into Hogsmeade, but I can meet you for supper on Monday evening in the castle. I'll meet you outside the Great Hall at 6 p.m. That was okay. Good enough. He could ask what he needed to ask anyway. Remus went to his lessons as usual on Monday and told the marauders at lunchtime. Sirius was speaking to him again, but not properly. For every small step forward, he and Remus seemed to take 3 enormous steps back. I'm having tea with Ferox tonight, he explained. So I won't see you until later. He knew James had Quidditch practice, which Peter would be watching, now that he had no girlfriend. Sirius sat up straighter. Should we come too? Why? Remus asked, fixing him with a cold stare. Sirius shrugged and looked back at his soup. By the time 6 o'clock rolled around, Remus was practically pacing the halls. He didn't want to look over-eager, so he'd waited at the top of the landing before going down to the main staircase at just 1 minute past the hour. This turned out to be something of a mistake. By the time he got there, Mary had found Ferox and struck up a conversation. Remus! She grinned as he descended. Look who's here! It's Mr. Lupin I'm here to see! Ferox smiled easily, shaking Remus's hand. It all felt very grown up. I'm trying to convince him to come back and teach us again, Mary explained cheerfully. We miss him, don't we, Remus? Yeah, of course. Remus nodded. Mary smiled at him and touched his forearm, leaning into him in a very familiar sort of way. He couldn't remember if she'd ever done that before. Can you wait here? She asked Ferox, still touching Remus. Marlene will be down in a minute. She'd love to see you. I'm afraid we need to get going, Ferox said kindly. Maybe another time, Miss MacDonald. Remus, shall we? Ferox followed Ferox up the staircase, rather than towards the hall, leaving Mary at the bottom. Thought we could do with a bit of privacy, Ferox murmured. Professor Kettleburn has kindly let me borrow my old office. Remus had only been in the Care of Magical Creatures office once since Ferox had left, to request an extension on an essay after a full moon. Kettlebun was a Spartan sort of man who had chosen not to decorate at all, but who had stacks of paperwork strewn all over the place. Ferox tidied this neatly away with a swish of his wand before summoning drinks and 2 plates for supper. The food appeared just as it did in the Great Hall, ham, eggs and chips tonight. "My favourite," Ferox smiled, motioning that Remus begin eating. They tucked in quietly for a few minutes, and Remus enjoyed the novelty of sharing dinner with a friend, rather than hundreds of other people. "So," he said, mopping up the last of his egg yolk with a chip, "I wanted to talk about Livia." "Look at you," Ferox nodded at him. 2 years ago, I could barely get you to say 2 words to me about yourself." Remus shrugged. "No time to be shy anymore, I suppose. There's a war on." "Don't I bloody know it," Ferox sighed. "All right, go on, lad." "Okay." Remus took a deep breath. "I don't want to join them, Greyback. I don't want to be part of their pack or anything like that." Ferox nodded, but said nothing. Remus, emboldened, continued. "But I think I could find them easily. I think they could find me. And they still want me. That's what Dumbledore wants, isn't it? A back door to the werewolves. I can do that. I know what I did was stupid, and I won't do it again, not while I'm at Hogwarts, not until I'm at least of age, but now I know her, now I know what they're like, I'm not afraid. I can do it." "I see. Has Dumbledore said—" "No, but I'm not stupid," Remus said dismissively. "He hasn't asked me to do anything, because he never asks. He just makes sure you know what he wants. But there are things I want too." "And what are those?" "I'm not signing the register on my birthday," Remus said steadily. "I'm not exposing myself to the Ministry. I've looked into it. If I do, I have to report to them for 3 days every month. They'll lock me up, I assume. It's not very clear from the information they put out. I can't keep a job like that. If Dumbledore needs a spy, then he needs me to be untraceable too." "I see," Ferox said again. "But I'm not finished," Remus snapped. "Afterwards, if we win, I want amnesty for the werewolves. Even Greyback's pack. Not Greyback, obviously, but his followers." "Remus, that's completely—" "No, it isn't." Remus folded his arms. "You don't know. Livia might be batshit, but she's not wrong. A choice between freedom under Greyback or imprisonment under the Ministry is an easy one to make." Ferox looked at him for a long time. Remus drank his pumpkin juice, his throat very dry. His heart was beating so fast he thought that Ferox must be able to hear it. "These aren't necessarily things Dumbledore can do," Ferox said slowly. "Bullshit." Remus set down his goblet a little too hard on the desk. "I can bring it to him," Ferox sighed, sounding defeated. "But I can't make promises." "Well," Remus replied coolly, "I'm 17 in 2 months, so there's a deadline." "Blimey." Ferox scratched his head. He sounded impressed rather than angry. "You don't half remind me of Lyle right now. What happened to the hot-headed kid always getting into scrapes?" "I'm still hot-headed," Remus said simply. "I think Lyle probably was too. It's not that I think Dumbledore can solve all my problems, but I wanted to lay all my cards on the table." "Fair enough," Ferox nodded. "All's fair in love and war." "I wouldn't know about that," Remus replied. Their plates vanished suddenly, then reappeared bearing 2 big wedges of chocolate cake topped with fruit. They ate them quietly, both deep in thought, occasionally shooting looks at each other. How's it going with Moody? Remus asked casually. I suppose you probably can't tell me anything. You suppose right, Ferox nodded. Moody's well, though. Complete nutter, but glad he's on our side. And Achilles? Achilles is fine, Ferox smiled. Staying with a friend of mine. Speaking of which, how long's the romance been going on, Lupin? The what? Remus stared at him wide-eyed. Ferox laughed. With Miss MacDonald down there. I'd have matched you better with Marlene. But I suppose the heart wants what it wants, yeah? Oh, Remus relaxed. No, Mary's just a friend. Ferox said, obviously not quite believing him. What's brought on this personality switch, then? Why does it have to be about a girl? 2 years is a long time, Remus said, annoyed. It's not like I've suddenly changed. Look, I first said I'd help Dumbledore fight when I was 14, he tried to explain. And then last year, James Potter told us all he planned to join as soon as he left school, and we all said we would too, and I was always going to, you know, but just because James and Sirius wanted to. I never had a reason myself, really. We're all going to suffer, if you know who wins, Ferox said. Yeah, suppose. Remus nodded diplomatically. I know that. I meant, well, I never really had much of a stake in it before. Now I've met Livia, I don't think anything's going to be that great for me after school finishes, no matter who's in power. I want a stake, if I live. You shouldn't compare yourself to them, Remus, the pack. Can't really help it, can I? Everyone else will. You know my friend, Sirius Black? Not well, Ferox replied. The Potters took him in, didn't they? I thought it was a bit odd, knowing his family. Exactly, Remus said triumphantly. Sirius is my best friend, and a Gryffindor, and the Potters love him. But to everyone else he's still a Black. He'll spend the rest of his life trying not to be, no matter how many good things he does, because people never forget things like that. They think that what you are makes you who you are. It's the same for me. Remus was struggling how to keep explaining. Ferox looked completely lost. He sighed heavily. I'm sorry it has to go through you. You're the only person I know who has any weight with Dumbledore who I trust. Who trusts me. Ferox watched him again with a steady expression. I will try, Remus. You're asking a lot. Remus frowned. He thought about Livia, her bare feet, her ragged clothes, her terrible cough, and the hollow look in her eyes. It was no way to live. He might be asking a lot, but Remus had never asked for anything before in his life. He hoped Dumbledore remembered that. Chapter 108, 6th Year, Mary. Friday the 5th of February, 1977. The rest of January seemed to whiz by in a blur, and Remus just tried to get back to normal. The full moon landed early in the month, and Remus threatened to lock the marauders out of the shack if they didn't promise to stay inside this time. Eventually, he knew he would weaken and allow them to begin letting him out again, but he felt that they ought to play it safe, at least for a while. The sudden distance between Remus and Sirius was painful, and made all the more difficult by the fact that their relationship, such that it was, had been a secret all along. Remus resorted to his usual tactic, burying himself in his studies, while Sirius absorbed himself in Emmeline. He was sulking, Remus knew, and for once he didn't blame him. The whole messy situation only proved to Remus that they had to put a stop to it as soon as they could. It was becoming impossible to stay friends, and they needed to be friends before anything else. The problem was, Sirius hadn't come to him at all since that night they'd slept in the common room. Remus was terrified that this meant it was already over, that Sirius had come to the realization on his own and simply chosen to stop. And Remus would not allow that. It couldn't just be finished without either of them saying anything about it. Surely. You held my hand, he wanted to say. You saw me cry. The day after the February full moon, Remus lay in his usual hospital bed, pondering these things. He had a cut on his arm, which Madame Pomfrey had told him to practice his healing charms on. It was very basic, but he was so tired after his transformation. You have to try, dear, the Medi-Witch said, unsympathetically. You wanted to be able to take care of yourself after the moons, so you'll just have to learn to find the strength. He prodded the cut, already healing by itself anyway, making another half-hearted attempt to fix it. Nothing. The marks Livia had left were dulled to pale pink now, and Madame Pomfrey thought they would probably vanish in time, as they weren't inherently magical wounds. You're welcome to leave, she called to him now from her office. If you're just going to sit there moping, go and see your friends. Remus didn't bother telling her that it was his friends, or rather, one friend in particular, he was moping about. But he never thought twice when she gave him permission to leave, so he got up and dressed quickly, hurrying out of the hospital wing. See you on Tuesday, he called on his way out. It was after lunch, and there was only one lesson left that day, Care of Magical Creatures, which Remus wasn't much in the mood for. He was ahead of the rest of the class anyway, and no one would miss him. He sloped along the corridors aimlessly for a while, still thinking about Sirius and Emmeline, and how he was going to... Wait a minute. He stopped and frowned, looking at the nearest portrait. Something was very off about it. The painting depicted an elderly wizard with thinning hair and a neat little goatee peering through a large golden telescope. For some reason, he was wearing an enormous bright red curly wig. It didn't seem to bother him. He just kept adjusting the sight of his contraption, murmuring quietly to himself. Remus snorted and looked at the next picture along. This one contained a group of pretty young shepherdesses tending to their flock, and they all had bright red wigs on too. The same with the next portrait, a witch carrying an overflowing basket of fruit, garish scarlet curls bouncing on her head. And the next, a sinister-looking monk, whose red wig actually sat on top of his hood. None of the subjects of the paintings seemed to be at all perturbed, and Remus followed the trail of bizarre headwear to the third-floor mezzanine. Padfoot! Remus gasped when he found the culprit. Sirius was at ease, hands in his pockets, chatting casually to a painting of giggly sea nymphs in a large golden frame. When she saw Remus, she gave a shriek and dived into the waves below. "Aw, Moony, what'd you scare her for?" Sirius tutted. "I was just about to cast the spell." "This is brilliant," Remus grinned, gesturing at all of the pictures he'd passed. "How come you never told me you're doing it? Is James in on it?" "Yeah, he's taking the east wing," Sirius nodded, moving to the next painting. "We just had the idea walking back to bed this morning." "Sorry, thought you'd be sleeping still." "Madame Pomfrey let me go." "Oh, right. You'll probably want to go to the library or something. I'm nearly finished here. No need for you to stick around." "No, Oh, shit!" The big grandfather clock in the great hall had begun chiming. Every classroom door was about to burst open, and students come pouring out to their next lessons. "They'll know it's us," Sirius said. "Quick!" He pulled James's invisibility cloak out from under his robes and raised it up like a tent. Remus hurried over to get under it, crouching slightly to compensate for their height difference. They both backed against the wall and waited. The doors began to slam open one at a time, and torrents of students filled the previously quiet space. Invisible and trapped, Remus realised that this was his best chance he'd had in days. "Oi!" he whispered, directly into Sirius's ear. He felt the other boy tense. "Are you still angry at me?" "What do you—" "You're avoiding me." "No, I'm not." Sirius pushed back, suddenly, as a third-year girl came a bit too close. He backed straight into Remus's chest, so that their whole bodies were now touching practically. "James said to give you space," he murmured. "And you left me out of the Hog's Heads mission, even after we'd said we'd go together." "It wasn't a mission," Remus whispered, struggling to keep his voice low. People were noticing the vandalized portraits now, pointing and laughing around. "And I never agreed to go together." "Well, it sent the message that you wanted space," Sirius shot back. He turned around so that he could whisper into Remus's ear too. They were still touching in some places, trying not to in others. "I'm sorry, okay?" Remus replied. "I didn't think you'd take it so hard." "I'm not taking it hard," Sirius spluttered, mortally offended. "You make me sound like..." "Like what?" Remus challenged. He could feel Sirius begin to pull away, so he kissed him. Fuck it. Thankfully, Sirius kissed him back, and as the hallways emptied once again, the noise slowly petering out. The two boys, hidden in plain sight under the cloak, were completely oblivious. Finally, Sirius did pull away, and Remus allowed it. "So now you like me again," Sirius grumbled. "Can't bloody keep up with you." "What are you talking about? You were avoiding me." "I thought you wanted me to." "Well, yeah, okay, I did. But not until we'd at least talked." "I really don't see what there is to talk about." Sirius threw off the cloak. His hair fell softly back into place, while Remus's was abuzz with static until he smoothed it down. "We're either doing, or we're not." God, I love arguing with you, Remus thought, feeling the heat flare up his neck, desire for Sirius just about burning him up. I could argue with you forever. "So?" Sirius said, backing away from Remus, knocking him out of his lustful haze. "Which is it?" "Well, it's a bit unfair to ask me that right now." Sirius bit his bottom lip and cocked an eyebrow. Remus just about died. "Come on then." Sirius jerked his head, moving towards the nearest staircase. "I'm bunking off divination. Dorm's empty." Thursday the 10th of February, 1977. What a mess. By the end of the next week, they were basically back to the beginning again. No talking, just touching. Sirius went out publicly with Emmeline, and at night he crept into Remus's bed, provided the coast was clear, of course. Sirius was nothing if not discreet, in this case at least. Conversely, Remus was finding that part more difficult than ever. A few months ago, it would have been fine. It had been fine. Just another secret to add to the list. Another part of himself that he mustn't let others see. But a lot had happened since then. Lily knew he was a werewolf, for example, and that had been a surprising relief. Sharing the secret with her had been a good thing. He was quite sure. Then there was Christopher, so courageous in bearing his soul, and all Remus could offer back were half-truths. When it came down to it, Remus could face a vicious killer in a dark alley, could make demands on Dumbledore himself, but he could not say no to Sirius. A real bloody mess. In one moment of utter weakness, Remus even found himself nearly confessing everything to James. They were in the library, looking for some obscure defence against the dark arts textbook, when Potter brought up Valentine's Day, which was looming. "I'm asking Evans to Hogsmeade this weekend, obviously," he said cheerily. "She'll say no, for tradition's sake. But I'm winning her over. I can feel it." Remus sighed, running his finger along the supple leather spines of the ancient texts. It wasn't that he wanted to celebrate Valentine's Day. It was a stupid girly day which he wanted nothing to do with. But he resented everyone else for wanting to do things for it. "And Wormtail actually asked out Dorcas Meadows," James laughed, crouching down to check a lower shelf. "Can you believe that? Sometimes I think he's got more guts than any of us." "Who's Dorcas Meadows?" "You've met her, haven't you? Hufflepuff in our year." Remus shrugged. "Suppose Sirius has taken Emmeline to Hogsmeade," he said. "Yeah, 'spect so." James replied, pulling out a book and opening it to check the index. Or another one of his many adoring fans, if she dumps him before then. What? Nothing. Remus shook his head, picking up a book at random and pretending to read it. Not being a wee bit judgmental there, are you, Moony? James wheedled, grinning. No, of course not. Remus fought to keep a straight face. Padfoot can do whatever he wants. But don't you think he's... I don't know, it's a bit much, all these girls. Like he's showing off. It's not loads of girls. He's been with Emmeline since December, hasn't he? January, Remus replied. He was single over Christmas. Well then, that's fine. The rest are just flirting. He's always liked attention. Yeah, but... Look, you just need to let Sirius be Sirius. He's a bit of a twat sometimes, but he's had a rough time of it. Let him enjoy himself if he wants. James stood up and looked at him sideways. You know, Moony, it wouldn't kill you to have a bit of fun either. Remus snorted. Oh, mate! James leaned over his shoulder to read the book Remus had open. Well done, you found it. Have a bit of fun. So perhaps Remus could blame it all on James, what happened next, anyway. Saturday the 12th of February, 1977. She'd been flirting with him for ages. Remus knew pretty well what flirting looked like by now. In the way she smiled, head tilted downwards. The way she had started pressing a hand to his chest when he made her laugh, which definitely seemed to happen more than usual too. That cute little wiggle girls do when they're fixing their tights. Eventually, they found themselves alone in the common room on that Hogsmeade weekend, just before Valentine's Day, homework finished, sitting squashed up on the sofa. And she just asked, which was more than Sirius had ever done. Remus and Mary had always been good friends. He liked her a lot. Her sunny, carefree nature had always appealed to his own gloomier side, her confidence to his introversion. He had ignored the flirting altogether, finding it mildly flattering, but otherwise uninteresting, until she decided to stay at the castle with him instead of going to Hogsmeade. How come you're not on a date, anyway? Remus asked, as they signed off their last few notes for the history essays. I wanted to spend some time with you. She smiled at him, settling back into the couch, her thighs touching his. Can't have you here all lonely. I'm not as much fun as Roman Rotherhide, I bet. Remus laughed, still not quite believing the direction this was going. Her hand was on his knee. Was she going to leave it there? Oh, crikey, no, she wasn't. Well, I don't know about that, she said, her voice low, leaning into him now, as her long fingers moved slowly upwards. I'd like to judge for myself. She blinked slowly and leaned in, kissing him softly on the lips. He was frozen to the spot. She smiled cheekily. Well, do you fancy it? She was very pretty. He wasn't as close to her as he was with Lily, so really, he reasoned, where was the harm? Whatever was going on with Sirius clearly didn't mean neither of them couldn't look elsewhere. And if Sirius could do it, then so could he. Only fair. He led her upstairs. You're lovely, she whispered, lying on his bed, eyes dark. He ran his hands up her soft thighs. Between her legs she was slick like warm oil. Afterwards, he wasn't sure what to make of it. It was certainly nothing to complain about. She was gorgeous, and the blood heat of her around him was definitely very exciting. But it wasn't the same as those dark furtive nights with Sirius, and none of the rich complexity, the sure understanding. Mary's soft jelly breasts were no substitute for Sirius's firm grip. Her sweet panting sighs did not arouse him in the same way as Sirius's hot rasping groans. All things said and done, while Remus was certainly glad to have the experience, he didn't think it was something he was much interested in repeating. Saturday the 13th of February, 1977. Only a day after the Mary experiment, Sirius was back, It was mid-afternoon, but James and Peter were both in the library studying for an upcoming Muggle Studies exam. It began, as ever, in silence and quiet, desperate need. Sirius was clutching and pulling at Remus's clothes. Then he rolled over and seemed to stop. He sniffed the pillow. Is that... That smells like... Mary's perfume. Yeah, Remus replied, uneasily. He had just removed his shirt and was feeling very exposed already, not sure if they were stopping altogether or just making casual conversation. She was here yesterday. Oh, right. You and her? Well, it was just a one-off sort of thing. Is that okay? Yeah. Sirius's eyes clouded over slightly, as if his mind was working extra fast. Yeah, of course. Good for you, mate. I know you two were, but it was ages ago now, and you're with Emmeline, so... Of course. I'm pleased for you, honestly, Mary's great. Yeah, she is. There were a few moments of silence, and Remus considered putting his shirt back on. But then Sirius leaned over, his expression changing, like a storm passing. He touched the scar that started at Remus's collarbone, dragged his finger down along its ragged path to his navel. Remus shivered. So, how was it? What? Remus just wanted to close his eyes, relax under Sirius's long fingers. Sex, Sirius said. Remus opened his eyes, confused. He wanted to know. It was good. She's, soft, you know. I mean, you know. Yeah. Sirius breathed into his neck, half on top of him now, his hands working on Remus's belt. Afterwards, they sat beside each other, and all Remus wanted to do was lay his head on Sirius's burning chest and close his eyes and just be. But he didn't. He stared at his friend, who was already lighting a cigarette, skin still pink and shining. He thought to himself, this will never be enough. End of chapter 108.